Hi, my name is Laura Chesnik with Empower Yourself Now. Today, I'm going to be interviewing, we're going to be having a discussion about energy generation in Ontario and the important concerns that citizens groups are raising. Energy production and generation is becoming a very important matter in Ontario as the government pursues a new expansion of the electrical grid as part of its plans to provide the electricity that companies in agriculture, mining, and the electric battery sectors are demanding to be profitable. Many decisions are being taken that affect all citizens of the province in this direction, which are of concern. And it is important that people be able to discuss and be informed about what is happening and decide the direction they want and the direction that serves them. Today, I'm joined by representatives of organizations that have been raising concerns and speaking out on how electrification should take place and what is in the best interest of their communities. I'm joined by Jane Wilson, president of Wind Concerns Ontario, a retired registered nurse and former healthcare writer and editor, as well as Margaret Benke, a retired school teacher and principal and board member of Wind Concerns Ontario, and Gord Gibbins, the chair of the Alliance to Protect Prince Edward County. Thank you all for joining me. Gord, can you talk about your organization and how you got involved?
Yes, I'd be glad to. The Alliance to Protect Prince Edward County was founded in 2007, but and largely around the issue of health, environment, and other effects of industrial wind turbines. At one point, I think there was over 20 projects which would have blotted Prince Edward County on all parts of it pretty well. Some of us were involved in the first project, which was called the Royal Road Wind Project in about 2001 and 2, and managed to take it to the OMB and get it defeated. When we got word that wind projects the contracts were being signed all over the county, we formed a group that had concerns about the health effects, the environmental effects the bird migration, economic effects, negative effects. And that was how APPEC got founded. And the Green Energy Act came in very shortly thereafter. And it soon became, even though we had studied, we set sort of research groups. We had one of the top medical doctors in Ontario, and we had engineers, we had lawyers, we had various other professional consultants, and a whole bunch of people that were very knowledgeable on the environmental aspects, including bird migration, turtles, and so on. And luckily, I guess, and that began a long road and a lot of money to protect Prince Edward County from the negative health and environmental effects. So along the way, I suppose the Green Energy Act forced you only to be able to concentrate on those two aspects to have a chance to win in the tribunal process that was set up. So we went more and more into both health and environment, linked with other environmental groups, some of which participated in the tribunals that we were involved in. We sponsored the first symposium in Canada on the health effects of industrial wind turbines, as another example, held in the county, and brought experts actually from all over the world. There were some noted doctors that were willing to take stances against big industry, I guess, since it was very lucrative. If you go back and look at the original payments to companies for both wind projects and the early solar, it was kind of criminal compared to what we were paying at the time. I think wind was in the 13 to 18 cent range, and solar was as high as 80 cents. And probably in those days we were paying 4 or 5 cents. So something didn't equate. And as I said, along the way, we learned more and more, did more and more research. And today, our mission statement, and I'll just read it to you: APPEC is committed to the health and well-being of the community and the conservation of our natural and cultural heritage. APPEC acts in response to proposed developments that have potentially significant and harmful impacts. And in Prince Edward County, which if you haven't been there, you should visit. It is an island, a lot of water, a lot of scenery. When we moved there in 1999, if you read the official plan, it used the words sense of place. There was a true sense about Prince Edward County. It's different today, but still has, I say, the same sense of place. And in 1999, it was very, very rural, perhaps somewhat backward in terms of electronic development as it relates to computer facilities and that type of thing, but was on the verge of expanding its tourism appeal, which the big one has always been the sandbanks, to rapidly growing wine industry, and still maintain its agricultural roots and its emphasis on conservation. And so the Alliance changed its mission, if you like, to not just be industrial wind turbines, but to emphasize all those aspects. We have since gone to council on a number of projects, such as a golf course development, which in our new official plan, there's something called natural core areas, which are to protect the environment. It was on a natural core area based on our submissions and others. We got that one defeated, and there have been a number of other industrial in general proposals that have not happened. And that's the strength of being an active industry, not industry, an active group for the community. And when I look at, if you look at our mission statement on the internet, first of all, it's not such a great site, but the mission and 8 steps of our mission, how we fulfill our mission, really center around doing the research on the developments, working with all levels of government, and you may or may not know that the Honorable Minister Todd Smith is Minister of Energy, so we've kind of got a position related to him. He was extremely helpful in getting the Green Energy Act reversed, and recognizing the municipalities should have their authority reinstored for energy projects. In fact, last fall was our speaker at our annual APPEC general meeting. So you can see there's a pretty close relationship there. The current mayor of Prince Edward County and several of the councilors, including the one for South Marysburg, which is where I live, are extremely attuned to the negative effects of industrial wind turbines and industrialization, understand the sense of place, understand the need for conservation. And through that, APPEC's involved with the South Shore Joint Initiative, with other interested groups like Nature Canada, PECFAN, the Bird Observatory, Ontario Nature. There's a whole bunch of them, in order to try to designate the South Shore as a nature conservancy. That is also highly supported by Minister Smith and even the federal government, although the actual designation hasn't yet happened. So when the whole concept of BESS came along, what is that? So we luckily we had some new younger members join and told us about their concerns, and so the research started, a lot of it done by them. some of it done by our president that I referred to earlier, and others. And we came to the conclusions presented to council, spoke to the councillors whose boards were going to be affected, and came up with the decision that we should take a negative approach and advise council not to proceed. Maybe that's all I'll say for now. I might add that along the way, and if I go back to 2009, there were many opposition groups, including Windsor, Essex, Kent counties had opposition groups. Jane probably could tell you the number, about 20, 30, 40 maybe at that time. We got together in 2009, a little schoolhouse. APPEC sent 3 members, one of which went immediately on to the WCO board, and the other 2 are still highly involved with APPEC. So that's a long story, I suppose, to describe it, but there you go. And I'll end there.
Okay, thank you. Jane and Margaret, the Wind Concerns Ontario is the organization that you folks are a part of. Can you kind of explain how did you get involved in that organization?
I'll go first, I guess. I got involved in 2009, I guess. I had no idea about what was going on. I have 3 sisters, 2 of them in other parts of Ontario were dealing with the problems of wind turbines. And I went to my local farmers market one day in August and found this community group there with a big map, and my house was going to be the closest to a proposal of 8 wind turbines. And at this point, they would have been the tallest, largest, most powerful in Ontario. So I went from not knowing anything about it to being the person in my village most affected. And because I already had some knowledge of this, got involved immediately. Wind Concerns Ontario, as Gord rightly points out, came together as a result of many community groups. At one point, there were 70, Gord, 70 community groups all the way from north of Superior down to Chatham-Kent, the Ottawa area, just everywhere, obviously Prince Edward County, but right throughout the province. Because when the government at that point, that's 2008, they started this being pushed by businesses mostly centered in Germany and Korea. It just went like wildfire, and communities were pushed and eventually cut right out of the process with the Green Energy Act. The premier at the time said the Green Energy Act was to get rid of what he called a patchwork of regulations. And he said, I'm not having this anymore. We want wind energy, wind power, and we're going to have it. And so the Green Energy Act removed the municipal powers of planning their own communities. So as Gord had just said to you, the current government has restored the municipal approval. It's now a mandatory part of any kind of approval. So Wind Concerns was what you really call a grassroots organization. The opposition, the proponents of wind power said, oh, you're all just old. All you care about is your property value. But really what you see in one group after another, their concerns were primarily environmental, whether it's wildlife or preservation of the groundwater. Like we've had a number of projects were on top of very vulnerable aquifers. And we have actually seen what the people's concerns about these projects have actually come true. So you had in a couple of cases where there was going to be a possible extinction of a species of wildlife. That again, Prince Edward County, Blendings turtle won the day there. In Margaret's area, it was bats. In another area, it was this tiny little fish called the red dace, and the community was fighting, literally fighting for a fish. So that's pretty much the history of it. It's opposition to and Gord touched on this again, the word industrial keeps coming up. This is absolutely critical to remember that wind turbines are not these bucolic, quiet things spinning in the breeze. They are an industrial use of the land, and they are being imposed on quiet communities without regard for what the communities want. It's a paternalistic approach to everything. So Laura, you were talking about what's best for communities. Our view is that communities know what's best for them. And they also know what the problems are. And in the former process of approval of these projects, communities' views were not taken into account at all. In fact, they were shunned and insulted, and you're all just a bunch of, I hate to use this word, NIMBY, but that's what they were told. So that's pretty much the history. Today we have the number of community groups has declined a bit. It's about 30 now. Still active, still, you know, people having meetings, still watching the landscape in terms of energy evolution, and so that's where we are today. You mentioned the battery energy storage issue. All we have is questions, and it doesn't appear there's too many answers. So that's our stand. We can probably talk more as you wish about that, but that's here we go again, where something is being put forward as this wonderful thing that's going to benefit everyone, but there's a lot of questions that have not been answered.
Great, thank you. Margaret?
I got involved, I guess, I had family members who were living in Western Ontario, and one particular young man unable to live in his house because he couldn't sleep there. That was one of the power projects that was going on there, who couldn't sell his house, couldn't give it away, I guess. And I know the hardship that that created. I'm one of a big family, I'm one of 9. And so I knew about it from the, you know, from it happening within our community or whatever. Anyway, and then all of a sudden discovered when there was a meeting, debate actually appointed in our local community center. And at that debate, we discovered that they were contemplating well, actually there were 3 projects that were vying for the approval of the municipal government. And we had not, anybody who didn't have enough land to be of interest to the companies didn't know about it. And people were told, people that were approached were told not to tell anybody. So in my line of, you know, I'm an educator and involved in the community. And when you tell people, I have a secret that I want you to keep, you're not allowed to tell anybody. Usually that's just a red beacon for there's trouble here. Anyway, so when we discovered that there was a possibility of something, it wasn't long afterwards where I guess I got together with a couple of friends and we did a presentation of the municipality based on the results that had come out from the Canada Health Study. And basically it's inconclusive. They didn't evaluate from the Health Canada study, they didn't evaluate anybody under the age of 18 or over the age of 79. And this was being used as the Bible by all of the proponent wind companies and their experts. And although it said right in the study that it was not to be used beyond the group that, or beyond the case study that was done. So anyway, so there were so many red flags. So I presented to our municipality so that they had an idea as an educator, just kind of what the background information was out there. And then of course, we discovered that there were 3 proponents vying for local property. And it's very complicated when it does happen, because you discover that these people who've been asked in secret to not tell anybody, but to sign their land up, well, they have a vested interest because maybe they're looking at retiring, or maybe they're looking at keeping their farm going, or this is all farmland. Or maybe they're looking at some way of providing an opportunity for local people to have an income in retirement. So people are saying, you know, like they're applying or appealing, companies are appealing to their sense of this is a way of keeping the farm in your family. They'll have an income, guaranteed income, 25,000 per year per turbine, you know, and so a whole bunch of people have signed up, but many of us are from big families. So you can't say anything in the community because so-and-so may not like it, but he may be your local electrician. And if he says something, people will not support, like the people who've signed up will not support the local electrician or won't support the local grocer or won't support. So people are really, it created a whole cloak and daggers kind of problem within the community. But anyway, so before the proponents had an opportunity to present at council, council sided with us and said that they would not support any of the proposals. Anyway, which was wonderful because more than 85% of the people in the area had concerns about putting an industrial wind project over top of existing properties. So it's not that you're finding an area where there are no villages or towns or houses within 5 kilometers and then using that area for wind turbines. You're saying, don't tell anybody, this is all secretive. And oh yes, by the way, when you finally see the maps, you're 550 meters from the closest wind turbine, you know? So it was all cloak and daggers. Basically, I called the proponents snake oil salesmen. But anyway, because they were selling something, offering large monetary rewards, like one of the fellows that I know was taken out for dinner, and because his wife didn't agree with it, but they said you only need one person in a family to agree before the project or the turbines can be put on your land. And they said to him, if you sign right now, took him out to a nice restaurant that most of us would never have been to, we'll give you this $5,000 right now. Well, a lot of us could use $5,000 right now, you know, like that's a good income. Anyway, so through all of this, we were able to convince the municipality that we did not want them here. So there were 3 projects in the vying, and it was supposed to be at that time that you had municipal support and agreement, abutting landowner agreement. So all of your landowners were supposed to agree if they abutted the property where the turbine was going, and in advance Indigenous support. So they needed support of the First Nations group that on whose property, you know, the project was proposed. Anyway, so in our case, one proponent decided to go ahead to the government to put forward the project, and the other 2 backed out. They had no municipal support or agreement. They had no abutting landowner agreement. They had no Indigenous agreement. And it mattered not. Ours was the first project to be chosen because it was the biggest one. And so of the 5 projects that was approved, ours was first and went ahead with a vengeance kind of. So the only option you have as a community group when a project goes forward, and the minister at the time, not the minister, someone in the minister's office was interviewed on CBC radio, and he just said the province has the right, government has the right to impose something that's believed to be in the best interest of all people. And honestly, both my dad and my father-in-law had said the same thing. You have no hope of winning. And I said, well, we may have no hope of winning, but I can't forgive myself if I don't try. You know, like I can't stand back and watch what my nephews went through, you know, like I can't stand back and watch that without doing anything. Anyway, so we appealed to the Environmental Review Tribunal for an appeal, and then that's a whole legal process, and you need to have experts. And of course, first time through that process, no teacher, which is where I came from, ever wants to have to go to court, right? Nobody, that's not our territory. And so we ended up trying to find local people, most of whom were retired, so that their careers wouldn't be impacted by testifying for us. We tried to find local people to support our position. And we discovered in the ERT, we challenged every aspect, that the ERT says there is no proof, regardless, that any human being has ever been impacted. Okay, so forget that one. Number 2, you discover that you have to prove conclusively that it will impact, not that it might impact, but that it will impact the community and provide significant harm, serious harm, I think is the word actually. And so you need to have PhDs, because when it comes to the tribunal, if you don't have a PhD to match their PhDs, and in our case, it was a company that had, I think, 32 billion euros was their value. If you look at our community, we were lucky to get $100 from somebody, you know, like, so it was a David versus Goliath kind of situation. And I learned a lot. I mean, there's no question that we learned a lot. It was an expensive lesson. And we did have support from Wind Concerns Ontario. Jane actually testified to the health concerns, but because she didn't have her PhD, that didn't count. So we discovered that anyway, based on the criteria, we did not win. We lost in court. So then we had an opportunity to appeal to the Minister of the Environment. We took it to that step. And then the minister actually agreed with us that there was going to be serious harm to the endangered bats. And then the company took it to the next level of court, and they won in the final thing. And then we couldn't afford to keep going. You know, when we're in over $100,000 in debt, you can't keep going that route and expecting local people to support you when you've lost. Anyway, so we kind of cut our losses and moved on. But we learned a whole lot about, and kind of about the government's approach. And I think they really are, federally and provincially, they're interested in innovation. So they're always looking for something new. And what most people don't know is they take a look. So who has the right to appeal for a project is anybody who may have an interest in making money from this project with the government. And so those people can apply for a project, very little regulation. So they have to complete the environmental approval process, which is minimal. But there's no oversight or regulation once a project is up. And that would apply to biomass, that would apply to biodigesters, that applies to solar projects, that applies to wind projects. So they're all left to the responsibility. The oversight is always the responsibility of the proponent, of the wind company, of the solar company that put it up or whatever. And there's no governmental oversight once the project is running. Now, people have the right to complain, but I don't have my PhD in, hydrogeology. So I'm not going to have a chance to complain. Then it's up to the wind company to address my problem and to try to solve it. So really, there's almost, once the projects are up and installed, there's no chance for the community to make an effective difference. So you just want to stop the project from going up in the first place.